Some places carry secrets so deep that even water cannot wash them away. In the heart of rural Pennsylvania, where the Allegheny Mountains cast long shadows over forgotten valleys, there lives a reservoir that the locals avoid after sunset. They say that on certain nights, when the moon hangs low and the wind dies to a whisper, you can hear something rising from beneath the surface. Not the cry of loons or the splash of fish, but something else entirely. Something human, something that should have stayed buried 70 years ago. This is the story of Willow Lake, and the truth that Claire Winters unearthed when she returned to the town her grandmother fled from half a century ago. A truth about progress, sacrifice, and the terrible price of silence. Before we dive into this chilling tale, we want to know where you are watching from. Drop your location in the comments below and let us know if you've ever encountered something unexplainable in your own hometown. And if you love macabre stories that will keep you up at night, make sure to subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next haunting narrative. Now, let us descend into the depths of Willow Lake. The rain had been falling for 3 days straight when Claire Winters first saw Willow Lake. It was late October 2019. And the drive from Philadelphia had taken longer than expected. The Sistema de Posicionamento Global had lost signal twice in the winding mountain roads, and by the time she reached the town of Millerton, Pennsylvania, the autumn sun had already begun its descent behind the tree-covered ridges. Millerton was the kind of place that Tim seemed to have overlooked. Population 847, according to the faded sign at the town's edge. Main Street consisted of a general store, a diner with flickering neon light, a post office, and a handful of houses with sagging porches. Claire parked her Honda in front of the diner, killed the engine, and sat for a moment, studying the town through rain-streaked windows. She was 32 years old, a freelance journalist from the city, with dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail and eyes that held the weariness of someone who had seen torment human interest stories turn into human tragedy stories. She had come to Millerton for one reason. You understand why her grandmother, Margaret Holloway, had left this place in 1952 and never spoken of it again. Margaret had died 3 months earlier, and among her possessions, Claire had found a small leather journal. Inside were newspaper clippings, faded photographs, and handwritten notes that suggested something terrible had happened in Millerton in the early 1950s. Something involving a dam, a valley, and a village called Willow Hollow that no longer existed. Claire grabbed her jacket from the passenger seat and made her way into the diner. A bell chimed above the door. Inside, the air smelled of coffee and fried onions. 3 elderly men sat at the counter, and a waitress in her 50s looked up from behind the register. Coffee, the waitress asked, her tone suggesting that strangers were unusual but not unwelcome. Please, Claire said, sliding onto a stool. And maybe some information, if you have a moment. The waitress poured coffee into a thick ceramic mug. Her name tag read Donna. She had tired eyes and hands that showed years of hard work. Information about what? Willow Lake, Claire said. In the village that was there before the dam was built. The 3 men at the counter stopped talking. The silence was immediate and heavy. Donna's expression shifted almost imperceptibly, a tightening around her mouth, a weariness in her eyes. That was a long time ago, Donna said carefully. I know, Claire replied. My grandmother lived here back then. Margaret Holloway. Did you know her? One of the old men, a weathered figure with white hair and a flannel shirt, turned slightly on his stool. Margaret Holloway, he said slowly. Haven't heard that name in decades. She was one of the ones who left after the flooding. I am trying to understand what happened, Claire said. Why did she leave? Why did she never come back? The old man exchanged glances with his companions. Some things are better left alone, miss. The dam brought jobs, brought prosperity. What was lost was unfortunate, but it was necessary. What was lost? Claire pressed. Homes, history, people, all of the above, the man said quietly. He stood, placed some bills on the counter, and walked toward the door. His friends followed. Before leaving, he turned back. If you were smart, you will finish your coffee and head back to wherever you came from. Willow Lake doesn't like being disturbed. The bell chimed as they left. Claire looked at Donna. What did he mean by that? Donna refilled Clary's mug, her movements careful and deliberate. Listen, honey, I don't know what your grandmother told you or didn't to tell you, but people here have made their peace with what happened. The dam was built. Willow Hollow was flooded. Families were relocated. It was a federal project, part of the infrastructure boom after the war. That is the story. But it is not the whole story, is it? Claire said. Donna leaned against the counter. Outside, the rain continued to fall, turning the street into a river of reflected lights. There are the stories, she admitted. Things people say they hear at night. Things people say they see when the water level drops in the summer. But stories don't mean truth, understand? They just mean people need something to talk about in a small town. What kind of things do they hear? Donna hesitated. Screaming, she said finally. On certain nights, people say they hear screaming coming from the lake, like someone drowning. But when the police check, there is never anyone there. Never any boats in distress, never any swimmers. Just water and darkness. Claire felt a chill run down her spine despite the warmth of the diner. How often does this happen? Often enough that people don't go near the lake after dark, Donna said. Nah, you've got other customers to tend to. You want my advice? Find a motel, get some sleep, and if you still want to poke around in the morning, that is your business. But don't go near that lake tonight. Claire finished her coffee, paid her bill, and walked back to her car. The rain had eased to a drizzle. She sat in the driver's seat, the journal in her lap, and opened it to a page she had read dozens of times. It was a newspaper clipping from the Millerton Gazette, dated November 15, 1952. Dam project complete. Willow Lake fills, bringing water and power to region. Beneath the headline was a photograph of the dam, a massive concrete structure spanning the valley. In the background, just visible, were the rooftops of houses disappearing beneath rising water. And in the margin, in her grandmother's handwriting, were the words, "Be light." Claire started the engine and drove toward the lake. The road wound through dense forests, the trees pressing close on either side. Fog had begun to roll in with the twilight, turning the world into something soft and indistinct. After 20 minutes, the trees gave way to open space, and Claire saw the lake for the first time. It was massive, stretching for miles, its surface dark and perfectly still despite the rain. The dam was at the far end, a wall of concrete and steel, imposing even at a distance. There was a small parking area near the shore, empty except for a rusted trash barrel and a weather-beaten information sign. Claire parked and got out. The air was cold and smelled of wet earth and decaying leaves. She walked to the edge of the water, her boots sinking slightly into the muddy shore. The lake was so still it looked almost solid, like black glass. She could see her reflection in it, distorted and wavering. She pulled out her phone and took several photographs, documenting the scene. Then she noticed something strange. About 50 yards from the shore, just beneath the surface, there was a shape. It looked almost like the peak of a roof, or perhaps a church steeple. She zoomed in with her camera, trying to get a clearer view, but the failing light made it difficult to be certain. A sound broke the silence. Not a scream, as Donna had mentioned, but something softer. A whisper, almost like whine through grass, except there was no grass here. Just water and stone and silence. Claire felt the hair on the back of her neck rise. She turned slowly, scanning the tree line, but saw nothing. "Hello," she called out. Her voice sounded small and swallowed by the fog. No response. Just that whisper again, coming from the water itself. She stepped closer to the edge, peering into the depths. For a moment, she thought she saw movement beneath the surface. A pale shape, rising and then sinking again. A trick of the light, she told herself. Just a reflection or a face or debris floating in the current. But it had looked like a hand. Claire backed away from the water, her heart pounding. She returned to her car, locked the doors, and sat there for a long moment, trying to rationalize what she had seen. She was tired, she told herself. The drive, the strange reception in town, the stories Dana had told, all of it was making her imagination run wild. She needed rest. She drove back to Millerton and found the only motel, a small building with a flickering vacancy sign. The clerk, a young man with headphones around his neck, barely looked up as he handed her a key. Room 7, ground floor, overlooking the parking lot. The room was clean but Spartan. A bed, a desk, a television that probably only received 3 channels. Claire dropped her bag on the bed and pulled out her laptop. She had cell service here, weak but functional. She opened her browser and began searching for information about Willow Hollow and the dam project. What she found was surprisingly sparse. A few mentions in historical archives, some newspaper articles from the early 1950s, but nothing detailed. Nothing that explained why an entire village had been so thoroughly erased from public memory. She found a reference to a property dispute, something about land rights and federal eminent domain, but the details were vague. Then she found something interesting. A digitized page from a 1951 county meeting minutes. There had been opposition to the dam project. She learned not everyone had been happy about the flooding of Willow Hollow. A group of residents had filed a formal complaint, arguing that the relocation terms were unfair and that the government's appraisals of their properties were too low. The complaint had been dismissed. The dam construction had proceeded on schedule. Among the names of those who had filed the complaint was Margaret Holloway, her grandmother. Claire leaned back in her chair, processing this. Her grandmother had fought against the dam. She had tried to stop it, or at least to get fair compensation for what was being taken. And she had lost. Then she had left town and never returned, never spoken about it, not even to her own family. Why? What had happened to make your silence so complete? Claire opened her grandmother's journal again and flipped through the pages marked carefully this time. Most of it was not names of other residents who had opposed the dam, but near the end, there was an entry that she had skimmed over before, not fully understanding its significance. October 30, 1952. The water was almost at the church now. I went back one last time before they sealed the valley. I had to see it, had to say goodbye, but something was wrong. The bells were ringing. I know they were supposed to have removed them weeks ago, but I heard them, clear as day, ringing beneath the water, and I saw lights in the windows of houses that should have been empty. I ran. I don't know what it was, but I ran, and he didn't stop until I was out of the valley. James thinks I am imagining things. Maybe I am, but I know what I heard. I know what I saw. They didn't evacuate everyone. I am certain of it now, and no one will listen. Claire read the passage 3 times. Her grandmother had believed that people had been left behind when the valley flooded, that the evacuation had been incomplete, that people had drowned. Could that be true? Could there have been such a catastrophic failure, such a horrific oversight, and it had been covered up for 70 years? She needed to know more. She needed to talk to someone who had been there, who remembered. But who in this town would talk to her? The old man in the diner had made it clear that the subject was closed. Donna had warned her to leave it alone. Then Claire remembered something. In her grandmother's journal, there had been a name mentioned several times. Father Benedict, a priest who had apparently supported the residents' complaint against the dam. If he had been a priest in 1952, he would be long dead by now, but perhaps there were church records, archives, something that might provide more information. She opened her laptop again and searched for churches in Millerton. There was one, St. Michael's Catholic Church, established 1889. She made a note of the address. She would go there first thing in the morning. Claire lay down on the bed, intending to rest for just a moment, but exhaustion overtook her. She fell into a deep sleep. Still fully clothed, the journal opened beside her. She dreamed of water, black water rising, filling streets, creeping up the walls of houses. People screaming from windows, pounding on glass, their voices muffled and distant. Church bells ringing beneath the surface, a mournful tolling that never stopped. And in the depths, shapes moving, human shapes, walking slowly across the submerged streets of a drowned village, their arms outstretched, their mouths open in silent screams. Claire woke with a gasp. The room was dark. She fumbled for the lamp on the nightstand and turned it on. Her phone showed 3:47 Amazonas. She had slept for hours but felt no more rested. The dream clung to her, vivid and disturbing. She got up, splashed water on her face in the small bathroom, and looked at herself in the mirror. Her eyes were bloodshot, her face pale. She looked like someone who had seen something they shouldn't have. Get it together, Claire, she muttered to herself. She made instant coffee with the small pot and the room and sat at the desk, forcing herself to think logically. Tomorrow, she would go to the church. She would search for records. She would find evidence, or she would find nothing, and either way, she would have an answer. This was just a story, a mystery to be solved through research and interviews, like dozens of other stories she had written. Except it didn't feel like just a story. At first light, Claire checked out of the motel and drove the street. Michael's church. It was a small stone building on the edge of town, with a modest steeple and stained glass windows that had probably been beautiful once but were now dulled by age and weather. The churchyard was overgrown, headstones leaning at odd angles among the weeds. The front door was unlocked. Inside, the air was cool and smelled of old wood and candle wax. Pews stretched toward an altar adorned with simple decorations. There was no one in sight. "Hello," Claire called softly. Her voice echoed in the empty space. A door at the side of the altar opened, and a man emerged. He was in his 60s, with gray hair and a kind face. He wore civilian clothes, jeans and a sweater, but there was a clerical collar visible at his neck. "Can I help you?" he asked. "I hope so," Claire said. "My name is Claire Winters. I am researching the history of Willow Hollow, the village that was flooded when the dam was built. I was hoping you might have some church records from the team." The priestess' expression became guarded. "That was before my team here. I've only been at street, Michael asked, for 15 years. But there must be records," Claire pressed. "Baptisms, marriages, funerals, anything that might tell me more about the people who lived there." The priest hesitated. "There are some old archives in the basement. I've never really gone through them thoroughly. Most of it is in boxes, disorganized. But you're very welcome to look, I suppose. Though I am not sure what you're hoping to find." "The truth," Claire said simply. He studied her for a moment, then nodded. "Follow me." He led her through a side door and down a narrow staircase. The basement was damp and musty, filled with boxes and old furniture. The priest pulled a chain to turn on the single bulb hanging from the ceiling. "Most of what is here dates back to the 40s and 50s, he said. "The previous priest, Father Benedict, he kept meticulous records. After he passed in 1975, they just boxed everything up and stored it down here. I keep meaning to organize it properly, but," he shrugged, "there is always something more pressing." "Father Benedict," Claire said. "That is the name in my grandmother's journal." She mentioned him. The priest raised his eyebrows. "Your grandmother knew Father Benedict. She lived here before the flooding." Margaret Holloway. Recognition flickered across his face. "Holloway. I've seen that name in the old records. I think there is a box specifically labeled with parish families from that era. Let me see if I can find it." He moved among the stacks of boxes, reading labels written in faded ink. Finally, he pulled out a cardboard box that looked like it might disintegrate at any moment. "Here, parish records, 1945 to 1955. Claire's hands trembled slightly as she took the box. "Thank you. I'll leave you to eat," the priest said. "I have to prepare for morning mass." "Take your team. Just let yourself out when you wait out, and make sure the front door is locked behind you." "I will." "Thank you, Father." He climbed the stairs, and Claire was alone in the basement with the box of secrets. She opened it carefully. Inside were ledgers, handwritten documents, and bundles of papers tied with string. She began sorting through them methodically. Baptism records, marriage certificates, funeral announcements, the mundane documentation of life in a small parish. Then she found something different. A folder marked a correspondence dam project. Inside were letters, dozens of them. Letters from parishioners to Father Benedict, expressing their fears and frustrations about the dam project. Letters from Father Benedict to government officials, pleading for more team, for better relocation terms, for transparency in the process. And then, most chillingly, a series of letters from the final weeks before the flooding. One letter, dated October 15, 1952, was from a woman named Eliza Keane. Claire read it with growing horror. "Dear Father Benedict, I know you said we all must leave by the 25th, but my husband Thomas is too old to be moved. The doctor says traveling could kill him. I have written to the dam authority 3 times asking for an extension of for medical transport, but I have received no reply. I don't know what to do. Please help us. Please don't let them forget about us. Another letter, dated October 20, from a man named Samuel Winters. The name made Claire's breath catch. Winters. Her grandmother's maiden name had been Holloway, but her married name, Claire's grandfather, had been named Winters. Could this Samuel be a relative? Father, the evacuation has been chaos. They're saying everyone is out, but I know for the fact that the King family is still in their home, and old Mr. Harrington refused to leave his farm. I saw lights in his windows last night, and there are others, Father. People who are to stop or to scared to go. Someone needs to go back and check before they close the valley. Please, you have to make them listen. The final letter in the folder was from Father Benedict himself, addressed to the Army Corps of Engineers, dated October 28, 1952, just 2 days before the flooding began. Sirs, I am writing to you one final time to express my grave concern that not all residents have been successfully evacuated from Willow Hollow. I have received multiple reports of families still residing in their homes. I understand that the project timeline is fixed and that the flooding cannot be delayed, but I implore you to conduct one final sweep of the valley before you close the access roads. To proceed without ensuring that every soul has been removed would be unconscionable. I await your urgent response. Clipped to the letter was a response, dated October 29, 1952, from a Major Douglas Crane. Father Benedict, your concerns have been noted. However, our records indicate that all mandatory evacuations have been completed as of October 25. Any individuals remaining in the valley after that have done so against explicit orders and legal directives. The valley will be sealed at 0600 hours on October 30, and flooding will commence immediately thereafter. The safety of those who have complied with evacuation orders cannot be jeopardized by those who have refused. The matter is closed. Claire sat back, the letter trembling in her hands. The valley had been sealed. The flooding had begun, and people had still been inside. Her grandmother had been right. They hadn't evacuated everyone, and the government had known. They had been informed, explicitly, and they had decided that the project schedule was more important than human lives. How many people had died? How many had been trapped in their homes as the water rose, pounding on windows, screaming for help that never came? Claire felt sick. This wasn't just a forgotten piece of history. This was a mass casualty event that had been deliberately covered up for 7 decades. She gathered the letters carefully, her hands shaking. She photographed each one with her phone, making sure every word was documented. This was evidence. This was the truth her grandmother had tried to tell, the truth that had haunted her for the rest of her life. But Claire needed more. She needed to know exactly what had happened on that day in October 1952. She needed to see for herself. She returned the box to its place, left the church, and drove back to Willow Lake. It was mid-morning now, and the fog had lifted. The lake looked different in daylight, less ominous but still unsettling. Claire parked in the same spot as before and walked to the shore. The water was clearer today, and she could see down several feet. The shapes beneath the surface were more visible now. There, about 30 yards out, was definitely a structure. A roof, perhaps, or the top of a wall. Claire returned to her coat and pulled out a pair of binoculars she kept in her travel bag. Through them, she could see more details. There were multiple structures visible beneath the water. Buildings, she was certain now. The remains of Willow Hollow, preserved in the depths of the lake. She scanned the shore and noticed a small wooden dock about 100 yards to her right. It looked old and neglected, but there was a small rowboat tied to it, half filled with rainwater. Claire made her way along the shore to the dock. The boat was in rough shape, but it looked functional. There was a single oar lying in the bottom. She looked around. There was no one inside, no houses nearby, no signs of ownership. She made a decision that she knew was reckless but felt necessary. She climbed into the boat, bailed out most of the water with her hands, and then tied the mooring rope. Using the oar as a paddle, She pushed away from the dock and began making her way toward the submerged structures. The water was calm, barely rippling as the boat glided across it. As she got closer to the spot where she had seen the roof, the water beneath her became clearer still. She could see down 20, maybe 30 feet, and what she saw made her stop rowing. There, directly beneath her, was the street. She could see the pavement, cracked and covered in silt, but still recognizable. And on either side of the street were houses. Their roofs had mostly collapsed, but the walls stood, windows dark and empty, like the Isakatsu skulls. Claire leaned over the side of the boat, staring down into the submerged world. It was like looking at a ghost town, except instead of being abandoned in the desert, it had been drowned and forgotten. Then she saw something that made her heart stop. In one of the windows of a house directly below her, there was something pale pressed against the glass. It looked like a hand, a human hand, pressed flat against the window as if someone inside was trying to signal, trying to escape. But that was impossible. The house had been underwater for 70 years. Anything that had been inside would be long gone, decomposed, scattered by currents. Claire told herself it was debris. A piece of fabric, maybe, or a branch that had floated in through a broken door. But it looked so much like a hand. She forced herself to keep rowing, moving along what had once been the main street of Willow Hollow. She saw more houses, a building that might have been a store, and then, rising above the others, the steeple of a church. The church was remarkably intact, its steeple rose within 10 feet of the surface, and through the clear water, Claire could see the front doors, still closed, still barred. The building seemed to have resisted the decay that could claim the other structures. Street, Marius. That is what it would have been called. She had seen it mentioned in Father Benedict's letters. As Clarice's boat drifted above the church, she heard it, faint but unmistakable. The sound of bells, church bells, ringing beneath the water, their tone muffled and distorted but still recognizable. Her grandmother had heard these bells 70 years ago, and now Claire was hearing them too. It wasn't possible. The bells would have been removed before the flooding, or if they hadn't been, they couldn't ring on their own. There was no mechanism, no wind to move them, nothing that could produce that sound, unless someone was ringing them. Clarice's rational mind rejected the thought even as it formed, but the sound continued. 3 tolls, then silence, then 3 more. A distress signal, a call for help. Stop it, Claire said aloud, her voice shaking. This isn't real. You were letting the stories get to you. It is just water curtain metal contracting or something perfectly ordinary. But the bells rang again, 3 tolls. And this time, Claire heard something else beneath the sound. Voices, faint and distant, but definitely human voices, crying out in distress. She grabbed the oar and began paddling frantically back toward shore. The boat moved agonizingly slowly. Behind her, the bells continued to ring, and the voices grew louder, more distinct. She could hear words now, or thought she could. Help us, please, help us. Claire didn't look back. She focused on the shore, on the dock, on anything except what might be behind her in the water. The boat bumped against the dock with a jolt that nearly threw her overboard. She scrambled out, tied the boat with shaking hands, and ran back to her car. Only when she was inside, doors locked, engine running, did she allow herself to look back at the lake. The surface was perfectly calm. There were no bells ringing now, no voices, just water and silence. But Claire knew what she had heard. Just as her grandmother had known 70 years ago, she drove back to Millerton, her mind racing. She needed to talk to someone, needed to share what she had found. The letters, the evidence of the incomplete evacuation, the sounds from beneath the water. Someone needed to know. She went to the diner. Donna was behind the counter, just as before. The place was empty except for one customer in a back booth. You ain't still here, Donna said. It wasn't a key to question. I need to talk to you, Claire said. It is important. Donna glanced at the customer in the back booth, then nodded toward the door. My shift ends in 10 minutes. Meet me outside. Claire waited by her car. True to her word, Donna emerged 10 minutes later, pulling on a jacket against the cold. She lit a cigarette and looked at Claire with an expression that was part curiosity, part resignation. You went to the lake, Donna said. How did you know? Because you have that look. Everyone who goes to the lake and actually pays attention comes back with that look. Donna took a long drag on her cigarette. What did you hear? Bells and voices. And I found letters at the church, correspondence firm before the flooding. Donna, they didn't evacuate everyone. People were still in the valley when they sealed it and let the water rise. The government knew, and they did it anyway. Donna didn't look surprised. She looks tired. Some of us have always known, she said quietly, or at least suspected. My grandmother lived here back then. She was friends with several families from Willow Hollow. After the flooding, some of them never resurfaced, never showed up in the relocation communities, never contacted their relatives. Just gone. We asked questions, but we were told they must have moved away, started new lives elsewhere. But my grandmother never believed it. She always said they were still down there. Why didn't anyone do anything? Claire demanded. Why didn't people investigate? Because this is a small town, and the dam brought jobs and money. Because the government said everything was fine, and who were we to argue with the federal government? Because people wanted to believe the official story, and it was easier to accept it than to think about what really happened. Donna stopped out her cigarette. And because every time someone did try to ask questions, they were shut down. Records were sealed. Officials refused to comment. Anyone who pushed too hard found themselves encouraged to leave town or worse. Worse how? Donna looked at Claire seriously. 3 people have drowned in that lake over the past 70 years. All of them were asking questions about Willow Hollow. All of them were ruled accidents. You tell me. Claire felt a chill that had nothing to do with the October air. Are you saying someone is covering this up? Still, after all this time, I'm saying that some people have a vested interest in keeping the past buried. And I'm saying you should be very careful about what you do with what you've found. Claire thought about the letters, safely photographed on her phone, backed up to cloud storage. I'm a journalist. This is what I do. I uncover the truth and I report it. Then you way braver than most, Donna said, or more foolish. I haven't decided which. She started to walk away, then turned back. If you were going to do this, do it right. Talk to Eleanor Keene. She is in her 90s now, lives in the nursing home on Rue Nova. Her parents were Thomas and Eliza Keene. She was 5 years old when the valley flooded. She might remember something. Thank you, Claire said. Donna just shook her head and walked away. The nursing home was a low brick building surrounded by bare trees. Inside, it smelled of disinfectant and boiled vegetables. The receptionist at the front desk was hesitant at first but eventually agreed to let Claire visit Eleanor Keene after Claire explained she was researching local history. Eleanor's room was on the 2nd floor, a small space with a single bed, a chair, and a window overlooking the parking lot. Eleanor herself was tiny, shrunken with age, her white hair thin and wispy, but her eyes were bright and alert. A visitor, she said as Claire entered. How lovely. I don't get many visitors these days, Mrs. Keene. My name is Claire Winters. I'm researching what happened to Willow Hollow, and I was told you might remember something about it. Eleanor's expression changed. The pleasant smile faded, replaced by something harder. Willow Hollow, she said softly. That is a name I haven't heard in a very long time. You lived there, didn't you? Before the flooding. I was just a child, 5 years old. But yes, I lived there with my parents and my older brother, Samuel. Eleanor's hands trembled slightly as she folded them in her lap. We were supposed to leave, you know. They gave everyone orders to evacuate. But my father was sick, very sick. My mother was terrified that moving him would kill him. So we stayed, just a few extra days, until he was strong enough to travel. But the flooding started before you could leave, Claire said gently. Eleanor nodded, tears forming in her eyes. I remember the water rising. I remember my mother screaming, my father trying to carry me upstairs. The water came so fast. It wasn't supposed to start until the next day, but it came early. Or maybe we lost track of time. I don't know. All I know is that the water rose, and we were trapped. How did you survive? My brother Samuel. He was 12 years old, and he was so brave. He broke a window on the second floor and helped us climb out onto the roof. We stayed there for hours, watching the water rise higher and higher. We could see other families on their roofs though, screaming for help. The Ringtons, the Bartletts, the Millers, all of them trapped, all of them calling for rescue that never came. Clarice's throat was tight. What happened to them? The water kept rising. One by one, the roof submerged. We heard them screaming until the water covered their mouths. My father was told we to hold on. He slipped into the water, and my mother went in after him. Someone held me, kept me from jumping into. We were the only ones from our house who made it to morning. Someone rescued you? Eleanor shook her head. Someone built a raft from pieces of wood and debris. He paddled us to the edge of the valley, to where the water hadn't reached yet. We walked for miles until we found a road. A truck driver picked us up and took us to the next town. By the time we got there, the valley was completely flooded. Everyone said the evacuation had been complete, that no one had been left behind. But I knew better. I had seen them. I had heard them. What happened to your brother? Samuel died 3 years later. Drowned in a swimming accident, they said. But I know better. He was the best swimmer in the county. He wouldn't have